Welcome back to the Business Ramble. In our first episode, we explored the foundations of building trust in business partnerships, setting boundaries, defining roles, and navigating the balance between ownership and leadership. In this episode, we're picking up where we left off, diving deeper into the nuances of power dynamics, ensuring every partner has a voice, and creating partnerships built to last. Let's get started. Okay, so we know in a 50-50 partnership, right, what we've covered thus far is you need to respect your partner enough to put it on paper and put everything on paper. Like you have your partnership agreement, you plan for all of the worst things and we document it. We plan for decision-making and disagreements and you document it. We plan for rules of engagements and our values and you document it. And then you implement, find ways and boundaries that you're going to put into place. And then again, you document it and you put it into place. You put it on your calendar and you stick to it. Now, what if it's not a 50-50 split? What if it's a 25-75? I think the really important question you have to answer there too is how did we get 75 to how are we defining the split? Because a lot of times people think, well, they put in $100,000, I put in $25,000, it's 75-25 split. But is one person putting in more time? Are we valuing time as part of the ownership stake, the stake of ownership? And all of this is negotiable, right? Like it's all negotiable, but you have to agree on it. I have friends that own a professional like corporate cleaning company. And one of the owners was able to put in a lot of money, but he can't put in any time. He had another business. But then one of the guys was able to put in all the time and work full time in the business. So it became more of an equal split because one couldn't put the sweat equity in. And I think sweat equity counts for a lot. I mean, if you don't have someone working in the business. Well, I know I think that's really important, right? Especially if you're on the side of like, I want to start this business with someone, but I don't have the capital, which is realistic, depending on what your background is. Like, that's what many of us face is we don't have this ability to just raise funds from our friends and family to start this, but I do have the time and commitment. And if you're in that position, you need to know that it's very valuable and it's worth the 50-50 split because without you, it wouldn't be happening. Right. But both partners or however many partners have to agree on that the sweat equity and the time equals the financial investment as well. Not just, well, I put in more money. If that's how you are approaching it, fine. Everyone just has to agree to them that the financial investment matters more than the time investment, or how are we valuing the time investment? But let's say someone puts in more money and can put in time and is working in the business. Yeah. I think it still comes back to, you need to ask the question, how are we determining 75-25 or this split? Are we accounting for someone's time and effort and sweat equity? Well, let's assume, right, that they agreed upon it. It's on paper, truly. I have 25%, you have 75%. What she was telling me was she felt powerless. She felt like, well, she was just waiting for them to exert their control and waiting for them to say something. So she felt like she had to agree. Because she's like, they'll probably be fine as long as I agree. But if I don't agree, are they going to push me out and buff me out? And my answer to that was, let's revisit what we just talked about with this 50-50 split. Yeah. Right. Which is these business foundations and these trusts. And I was like, were you an owner or were you a C-suite with equity in the company? Yeah. There's a very big difference there. Yep. And she was like, what do you mean by C-suite with equity? I was like, were you CEO, COO, whatever else, and you happen to have also a percentage ownership? Because lots of companies do that more nowadays, where you essentially can vote, but that's about it. Right. Or you get a percentage of revenue profit. Yeah. Yeah. And with that comes the voting rights usually. You're like, no, it was like a true partnership. I was like, okay, well then a true partnership means there are business decisions that have to be on you as well as on them. That means at some point when you go and sit down and you do the split, and maybe it's not as 50-50 as it is with you and Amber, But what are the areas that you specialize in and that you're going to be covering? And those are the business decisions that are on your plate that you get to make.
Yep.
And you also get to veto other things because of it. Otherwise, that is not a partnership. At the end of the day, like, you don't have any business decisions. Sure, you get equity in a company, but like, you're not an owner.
Right.
And I think that part's really important. So if we go back, right, and you document it like you're supposed to, like we talked about, we put what if this happens and this happens in a place, and then you put in decision making and where the buck stops with whom. That's where you have that split where you can say, okay, well, I do have power because these are the areas of which I have been given responsibility and this form of control.
Yep.
But none of that's going to work if this last piece, which we've waxed on poetically about, is not in place, which is at the end of the day, you have to trust. You have to choose to trust. They have to trust you and you have to trust them. You've got to put those things in place.
Yep. Yep.
Even if we were split, I would hopefully be able to trust that you're not going to, unrealistically exert your control over me.
Right. And I think one of the ways to do that is, well, I think there's two things that have come to mind. The first is one of the tools that we use on the team alignment and how you're choosing to approach decisions. So, for example, you need to document this, but when it comes to financial decisions for the company, I might personally be very conservative with my personal budget and my spending and be very conservative with any investments that I make. Like, I just like to play it safe. But I happen to work for a company that needs me to be a little more risk tolerant. We need to take a little more risks. If I bring my personal approach and say, no, we shouldn't do that, or I don't want to spend there until we know more, but the business requires a little more risk, if I am not, again, stepping outside of my personal needs and saying, okay, what's best for the business? And how are we as a partnership determining how we're going to make those decisions? Meaning we're going to approach it from the perspective that we can absorb a little bit more. Like if it blows up, we can absorb that. We know we need to take a risk for the sake of growth, whatever the decision might be. If I can't separate my personal perspective from what the business needs, I'm always going to be making personal decisions about the business.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to say, what is best for the business? Again, if you're a parent or you're in a partnership, like, what's best for the family? I tell my kids all the time, hey, this might be a little bit of sacrifice for one of you guys, but it's the best decision for the family that meets the most needs for everyone in the family. Or if you're in a partnership, like, what's best for the partnership? What allows the partnership to succeed? What's the best decision for the business and for the growth, and based on the goals that we have set in the direction that we want to go?
It's a really important aspect. And personally, I don't feel like you should go into business with somebody who you can't trust to uphold that. I think that's a really important part of choosing your co-founder. You want to choose somebody who not only complements your skills, but is in agreement with you on the ways in which we need to navigate this world and this business. And the same thing comes into play when we talk about building trust and partnerships. Investors, right? It's a hard thing to do, because usually when startups are at the point where they're raising money, they're starting to feel scarce and they're approaching a lot of scarcity. But gotta vet your investors.
Yeah.
Because if your investors are expecting you to not be as risky, and you are expecting you to be, you are going to have a lot of problems and a lot of stress and a lot of tension in that relationship. And I mean, when you take on an investor, you basically take on a boss in a way, right? Depending on how you do it. But you have someone now you kind of have to report to.
Yep.
It's the same as almost like a business partnership. They can't dictate everything you do,
Yeah.
but they can dictate whether you get more resources or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a potentially tenuous relationship that you need to get in front of by having these set parameters in place and then acting on them. And then saying, this is the rules of engagement of which our team has agreed upon. These are the rules that we require for our board to agree upon. And if you can't and you disagree, we need to know, because this is not the opportunity for you.
Right.
And kind of go from there. And remember your power and your place in this as much as the investor's side, because money only gets you halfway there.
Right.
You got to be able to do the other part too.
Yeah. I think it's important to acknowledge too, if you're in a business partnership, I think because your friend was the 25% owner, I think it's important to know, like, if let's say you're the 75% owner, one thing that is going to be really critical as a majority owner is you're going to have to get over yourself a little bit and delegate and allow, and again, that trust, you're going to have to let the 25% owner have their piece of the pie and say, hey, nope, the buck stops with Sue on these 5 things. And I am, because it's a partnership and not just a equity, I am deferring the decision-making on these key things because they're part owner, which means they own this piece of the business.
Yeah.
And you're just going to have to, you have to put your ego aside. And I think you cannot lord that over them. I own more of the business. That's not a healthy partnership. And so if you are co-owners in any capacity, whoever has the bigger piece of ownership still has to respect, acknowledge, trust, and empower the other owner to be able to do the piece of the pie that is theirs to manage.
I feel like we covered that really well. And if people have questions, they can absolutely drop them wherever we're posting this, which we haven't decided as of right now. So probably YouTube, LinkedIn, those type of things. But I wanted to leave y'all with, so, you've got your action items that we put earlier in the episode. But here's a couple tools that Amber and I use a lot that help. And I think the number one, and it's probably not a surprise, is an app called Voxer, Voxer. And you can have free account. But what's so great about it is if you're like me, you're super ADD, and the effort it takes from getting things from my brain and my mouth down to my thumbs and typing them out in email is astronomical. Major executive dysfunction on this. Voxer is like a walkie-talkie app, right? And allows for us to essentially have asynchronous phone calls without us having to stop what we're doing, which is the biggest time saver. The amount that we're able to talk but not have to sit down and stop. I can get to it when I can get to it. It's extremely helpful. It also allows for me, if I've got a thought in the moment or Amber has thought in the moment, like, hey, we're going to drop this in here so we can talk about it later. Like, get it out. Let us keep going.
Yep.
We do a weekly one with the team where we're like, here, drop in, here's what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And then she and I do a daily one, like she said earlier. And we always structure it with what are the wins, whether it's from yesterday or what's going on today, what are your challenges, and then what are you grateful for? And then what is it you need today? How can we best help each other? Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, so often it's sometimes like, we're females running a business. The menstrual cycles really take us out sometimes. That's a real freaking reality. Yeah. We're like, what? I just started my period and I want to set the world on fire and I'm in a lot of pain and I have no energy. So what can we not do today?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's helpful. We've been able to make so much progress and growth in our business and in our business relationship. And we haven't had these like, oh, we're so behind. I don't know the last time we really felt like we're behind.
Yeah.
Because we're able to shift and communicate. And so that's one of those tools that I recommend y'all using, especially if you have a co-founder who is maybe more chattier than you. That way they still have their space and you have the space and you can give it to them, but when it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because your work schedules might not sync up, and that's totally okay. It's
Yep.
absolutely normal. But I would say like, that's the biggest one. Do you have another one, Amber, that you feel like is
Well, I think we also just built in our schedule. Mondays is internal.
yeah,
We just decided that Mondays were internal, and unless it is like there's no other time, we don't schedule out external meetings that day. So that's just been helpful because it keeps us on the same page. We talk about how do we win this week? What does our week look like? What needs to stay? What do we need to prep for? What can we take off each other's plates? All that kind of stuff.
and I was just telling Kyle yesterday, my husband Kyle, I was like,
Mhm.
if I go on vacation or do whatever, I think Mondays are the day I don't want to miss. I would
Yeah.
rather miss like a Thursday, Friday, or
Yeah.
Wednesday, whatever. And because when we don't have our Mondays,
Yeah.
it's the only time we do feel behind.
Right.
Because we're like, what are we doing? Who's doing what? What's our schedule? Do we need to move that?
Yeah.
It becomes, we lose the focus that we get in a later week because we didn't have that beginning session. So for me, I'm going to do everything I can to be available on Mondays. Even if I'm on vacation, I still want to have the meeting just so that we're in a good place. Because I just feel so behind and tired on the days where we start on Tuesdays or we're having to like balance
Yeah.
doing work and planning work.
Yeah. 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 And then a couple other things we do that are just helpful is we have shared calendar. Like we can see each other's calendars so we know kind of what's going on. And we have put really strong parameters around when meetings are. Like pretty
Yeah.
much we try as best we can Friday after 1 o'clock. There's no meetings on the calendar if we can help it.
Yeah.
Today it's different, but
So it's still true, but nothing I can do.
yeah. And then we only book so many, but those are those rules of engagement that we practice consistently. So
Well, we hope this was useful, helpful, and that you can take what serves you and implement it back into your business relationships. Or if you're thinking about going into business, these are some of the pieces that maybe you can bring to the table to talk about. So thank you for listening. If I'm on any sort of platform where you can like and share, please do that. I'm sure we will be. I think you're talking about YouTube, LinkedIn.
yeah.
I don't know if we're going to do the clock app yet, but we'll see. It depends on my editing time and skills. But thanks everybody, and we'll see you next